I'm recording a video today to show what happens after the firmware upgrade on an MD-02 rotator controller. Let's check the firmware, and here we go, version 2.0, and it starts up fine. So let's explore the first behavior that's a little bit odd. Here we're driving the rotator manually just by holding down the button, and watch, when it gets to 91 degrees I let go of the button and stop it driving, but the rotator keeps going to 100 degrees, 101, and then returns. Here we go, let go, goes up to 101, and then it goes back to 97, and then it finally stops, decides to stop at 97. So that's very odd behavior. So let's look at that again in slow motion. We've pressed the button, and at 91 degrees we let go of the button, but it keeps going from 91 and it keeps going all the way up to 101. There we go. And then it returns all by itself, returns back to 97.7, where it finally decides to stop and stay. So who knows why it did that, but it went over 10 degrees over and then 3 degrees back. So from where we stopped, we'll try again. We'll try another go, and it goes up. We let go at about 112, and there it stops. And sure enough, it stops and it stays right where it should. So let's just see what happens next. We'll try again with the manual button. Press the button and we keep going, and we'll keep going up for a while, and I'll let go of the button at 163 degrees. So remember that number, we're coming up to it. There we go, let go of the button, and it keeps running up and up and up to 173, and then it turns back and it goes back all the way to 165. That's an interesting effect, isn't it? So let's just look at that again in slow motion. Here we go, we're coming up to 163, taking the finger off, and it keeps going up to 173, and then it keeps running back and back and back and back and back, and it keeps going all the way down again to, where does it stop? About 165. So there we go. It did exactly the same thing that it did the first time. Pretty random. So let's just quickly recap what we've seen so far. We operate the rotator manually, and it runs, and once we take our finger off the button, sometimes it keeps running on another 10 degrees, then reverses back and reverses back sometimes 3 degrees. The second time it reverses back nearly 10 degrees. So it's pretty random, it's pretty unpredictable. But you know, the second time of the operation, it stopped immediately. It was a very short run, but as soon as we let the button go, it stopped. Sometimes it just keeps running. There's no apparent reason why it does that. And I can't really make any sense of it. But now let's go and look at another problem with this rotator firmware. So this problem appears when the computer sends a command to the rotator to drive to a certain position. So in this case, there's no button action. It's just we're just activating the computer and tell the computer to park the rotator. Now, park means it sends it to position 0. So here we go. It's starting to move, and it's moving, and oh, it stopped for no apparent reason. Okay, we'll go back to the computer. We'll send it another command to park the rotator. So here's another command that says go to 0. And here we go, it starts again, and it runs and it runs and it runs, but of course for no apparent reason at some stage it will just stop again. Okay, well, that was interesting. We'll send it the same command again, go to position 0, and this time it runs, but didn't run far, just went a couple of degrees there. Now we send it the command again and try and make it run. Well, this time, oh, there we go, it runs only 1 degree, right. So we'll try and do the same thing again. Send it the park command, park rotators, which is a command that says go to 0, and this time it didn't move at all. So we sent it the command, and now the next time it did. It went for a few degrees. So this is a very interesting scenario where the rotator just randomly stops when it is sent a command to go to a certain position. The motors are calibrated according to the calibration procedure. Everything appears to be right. It's got this strange behavior of stopping just randomly anywhere. Now, this apparent stop produces no alarms, there appears to be nothing wrong, and also the rotator starts again. So at the moment we send the rotator another command to go to 0, it starts. It starts in the correct direction. It just stops at a random position. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason as to where it stops. So who knows why, but yeah, that firmware certainly leaves a lot to be desired. When I brought this problem to the attention of the firmware authors, they gave me a couple of tips, and they said, well, make sure the motors are calibrated. They must be calibrated, and if the calibration doesn't help, then turn off the soft start. So you can see here in the background, yep, it's still doing it. And of course the soft start was turned off. It was switched to what the menu says is immediately. Now just to prove that is the case, here we go. We're looking through the configuration. You can see what it is. It's got immediate start, immediate stop, and of course we've got the USB, the ROT2 control. So there we go. These are all the things that I've been asked to look at. So here's a few pictures so people can get an idea on what that rotator is actually driving. There's the rotator mounted up on the roof, and you'll see some more pictures coming up that are showing the actual antennas. Now the engineers at SPID, that is what they've come back to me. They said they cannot recreate this problem, and they've asked to run the speed calibration, and they've asked to set start and stop to immediately. So you've all seen that this is exactly what's happening when start and stop is set to immediately. The rotator is not very highly lighted. They are fairly lightweight antennas, and of course the rotator is the high resolution rotator that has got the encoders on it. So there we go. That's as much as I can tell anyone about firmware 2.0. Not a very good firmware in my book. Now the actual SPID rotator is a very, very nice piece of equipment and a great design, and I really like the rotator. It is robust, it is rugged. I have got absolutely nothing to complain about with that rotator. It's built the way a rotator should be built. So I'm a very happy customer when it comes to the SPID rotator. And even with the controller, the MD-02, that's a controller which is actually very, very nice. The hardware is really good. What it does is excellent. The way it's designed, it's a modern rotator with a USB port that plugs straight into the computer. So the controller is fantastic. I really like the equipment. However, it is all let down by the firmware. The firmware is just nothing short of disastrous. Version 1 of the firmware came up with a pulse timeout, so the encoder wasn't sending pulses while it was driving the motor. Well, it said it was driving the motor, where in fact it wasn't driving the motor at all. The motor would stop, and then a few seconds later the alarm would come up, pulse timeout, and that could only be reset by turning the rotator off and back on. So that was a version 1 problem, which wasn't that great, and there was some other problems as well. And fair enough, they were concentrating on writing version 2, so they didn't really do much on version 1, fair enough. But for version 2 to come out and to have such very basic firmware faults, and they are just very basic firmware faults that they say they cannot reproduce, but obviously it's clear to see that those problems are there. So that is very disappointing when we've got an otherwise fantastic product that is really nice, all let down by those that designed the firmware. So he is hoping to getting a new firmware that is actually going to work and is actually going to do what it's supposed to be doing, and that does justice to an otherwise excellent suite of equipment. Thank you for watching.